Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for a Corporate Secretaries focused webinar looking at building board capacity and competencies. And this is the voice of Erin Hancock. I'm the Manager of Research and Education with the Canadian Co-operative Association. And we're so pleased to be able to bring people together via GoToWebinar because, as many of you know, over the past number of years, we've been able to offer a few different focused events looking at building governance capacity in co-ops and credit unions across Canada by having a face-to-face meeting for the corporate secretaries or those folks within co-ops and credit unions that really serve the function of working with the board and working with the governance function of the organization. So we had suggestions at our last meeting that we had to do something to keep the connections happening throughout the year and not just on those special years when we're having a face-to-face meeting. So this is what came up, and we were very fortunate that we have two top-notch speakers that will be our initial featured speakers for this first time that we're offering this webinar. So I wanted to take a moment to introduce them, and I'm sure that they're not strangers to many of you. We have Kim Andres, who's starting things off today. So she's a very familiar face within the credit union system, especially in Canada. So you know that she's got a great background in facilitating group meetings. She's done a lot of strategic planning meetings for individual credit unions. She's also worked with the centrals at the provincial level and also the subsidiary organizations of the Credit Union Central of Canada. She has a Master's of Business Administration from Queen's University. She attended the Advanced Leadership Institute at Harvard University, and she's a certified management consultant and a certified corporate director. So she's got the experience and also the education that she brings to sharing this content with us today. She's been recognized through her contributions to the credit union system. In 2006, she was honored with a Rising 100 distinction from Madison, Wisconsin-based Credit Union Executive Society. You know her probably as a speaker at many events that you've attended, certainly in terms of leadership within the credit union system and governance. And then our second speaker that we have with us today is Carmel Bellamy, also not a stranger to many of you, I'm sure. So Carmel is the Associate Secretary and Director of Corporate Governance and Cooperative Relations at the Co-operators. She's responsible for providing corporate governance leadership and support to the Co-operators Board of Directors, to the board committees, and also senior management. She directs and develops programs, processes, and policy to enhance the effectiveness of the board and individual directors, as well as the democratic functioning of the co-operators and all of the communications that happen between board and management as well. She's led the charge to develop a competency-based director development program, which actually launched earlier this year in 2013. And she's a member of the Canadian Society for Corporate Secretaries. So as you can see, we're very fortunate to have these two folks here today. And so what I'll do now is I'll hand it over to Kim. Welcome, Kim, and we'll let you get things started.
All right. I'll just make it full screen for you.
Okay, great.
And then we'll be fine here. There we go. All right. Can you see it full screen now?
Yes, looks great. Thank you.
All right. Good stuff. Okay. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to join you this morning. And I want to add my thanks also to Carmel. She and I have had the chance to work together on a number of projects, and it's always really great to work with someone who's an advocate for their board and who's also really knowledgeable about governance issues. What I'm going to do over the next 50 minutes or so is try to focus on four things. The first thing is focusing on how to determine for your cooperative or your credit union what the appropriate skills and competencies should be. So what's your governance environment? What are you trying to accomplish as an organization? And then how do you engage your board members in that change process? The second thing that I want to do is talk briefly about what a sample competency matrix can look like, and then what are some of the tips that organizations can employ to customize that for their own operations. Thirdly, I want to talk about how a governance group can actually assess their performance and make sure that the work that they're doing is non-biased, that it's very open and inclusive. And lastly, how do we measure success? So how would you anticipate the change that your organization is going to go through, and then how will you make that happen? So I'm going to do this in a very high level, but my contact information is on the last slide. And if anyone has any questions, I think we've got time at the end of the webinar, but also feel free to contact me offline. I'm happy to talk to anybody about this content at any time. So I'm a bit of a visual person, so I wanted to give you a picture to sort of describe the whole competency, skills, and qualifications process for boards in a pictorial. And then what you can do is kind of rely on that as we're going through our slides. Just going to try to move this one thing out of my way here. There we go. So the circle sort of starts anywhere, but we'll start with the leadership portion of this. So what you need is a board that's ready and interested in going ahead with a change in the way that it assesses its governance. So you need board leadership. And that board needs to have a very clear idea as to what the difference they're going to make for their organization is. And then the role of the assessment is to do a baseline or to confirm the status quo. So how is the board doing in comparison to what the board wants to accomplish? The results of that assessment are then used for recruiting new directors that may have the skills and competencies that the board's looking for to supplement what it already has. But the assessment results are also used for development purposes. So where are the gaps, and collectively where should the board be investing its time and energy in developing its skills and competencies? And then the next piece is the achievement. So if we assess our results, we recruit and we develop the board against those results, are we getting the change that we want, which leads to another opportunity for the board to look forward in a leadership capacity. So think of it as a circle. In the middle of the circle is stakeholder value. And in my opinion, that's the most important role of the board, is to maintain and create value on behalf of the stakeholders. And in a cooperative, maintain and create value on behalf of the shareholders. And so when I talk about the creation of value, I'm not necessarily just thinking of financial value. There's lots of ways that cooperatives create value for their stakeholders. So the board needs to have a very clear idea of what value looks like, and then they need to have a plan as to how to achieve that, and they need to draw on skills and resources that will help them get where they need to go. So just moving ahead here. I'm borrowing this slide from a book that was written in 2005. The book was called Building Better Boards, A Blueprint for Effective Governance, and it was written by a few people, but the one that I want to recognize most prominently is Beverly Behan. And it's a book that really was quite important for me to read a few years ago because it talked about an engaged board, and it talked about organizations having a board of directors that works in partnership with management in such a way that the board is just as committed to the successful implementation of the strategies, goals, and objectives of the credit union as the management team is. So in this environment, the board's not doing the work of management, but they're leveraging their own skills and resources in support of what the organization is trying to achieve. And that's quite different than what we may have seen in recent years with boards of directors. So, in the kind of the good old days, you had a passive board that really just confirmed that the direction that management was going in was the right direction. And then more recently, we've had certified boards where boards really view their responsibilities to comply and oversee the work of management. And the certifying board is an important role, and I don't want to take that away. But in addition to that, I think there's an obligation or an opportunity for boards of directors to become engaged and actually add their own value to the organization. So not just critique and oversee and monitor compliance, but also find ways that they, with their own skills and resources, can add additional value. And then when you move farther to the right, you've got an intervening board that is much more operationally focused, and then an operating board that might be in a startup kind of company. So generally we wouldn't see the boards really over on the right of the screen, and I think the past was really on the left-hand side of the screen. So the model that I'm promoting for skills and competencies, director skills and competencies, really focuses on this middle column where we've got an engaged group of directors who collectively want to add value to the organization and have just as much feeling just as much accountability for the successful achievement of those as the management team. So with that kind of bias in mind, then what does this organization, what does this change look like? The first thing that has to happen is that the board itself needs to want to behave differently, needs to want to have a different kind of relationship with the organization. So it needs to very clearly articulate the rationale for the change, and you need the board to buy in, and you need at least one champion on the board to move this forward. I think management can very quickly see the benefits that would be derived to the organization if you had more of an engaged board. But management really can't drive this kind of change. You need somebody on the board that's making that happen, that's driving it forward. So that's part of that leadership circle. The second thing that needs to happen is that you need to build yourself a competency matrix that becomes a tool for you for some very deliberate discussion. And that matrix ties the competencies of the organization to the vision and the mission of the organization. That matrix is also used for the assessment and the recruitment and the development. That matrix includes the kind of experience you want your directors to have. So if we're talking about a credit union, and that credit union has a particularly strong social mandate, you may want to recruit directors who are familiar with that mandate so that they can draw on their experience to supplement the strategies that the organization is developing. You may also want directors that have a particular type of expertise. So your organization might be quite complex. You might have lines of business that require some complexity, and you may be looking for directors that bring that expertise to the table. You may also be looking for directors that have particular is going through a sales culture change, and part of the sales culture is a very strong team-based environment. You may want the leaders around your board table to also be very experienced in participating or leading high-performing teams. So that might be an example of the kind of characteristics that you might be looking for in the board of directors. It's also important to make sure that everyone on the board shares the same interpretation or definition of what an experience, expertise, or personal characteristic might be. For example, I was working not too long ago with a board of directors, and one of the competencies was technology governance, but it hadn't been really well discussed at the table. I think a lot of people assumed that others had the same interpretation of them around technical governance or technology governance competencies. And it turned out that there was a really wide range of interpretations around what technology governance expertise actually looked like. And so through the assessment process, we identified that, and we learned the need to spend more time on definitions and making sure that everyone's on the same wavelength with that. The next thing that needs to happen is that you need to make sure that your skills and competencies tie back to any fiduciary, regulatory, or strategic objectives that you have. I'm going to start talking a little bit more technically now, but when you've identified a particular skill or competency, it's useful to give people a range that they can consider it from. So let's use financial literacy as the competency. So you ask the directors, do you feel that you have a basic level of financial literacy versus a good level, a strong level, or an expert level? And for each of those 4 levels, you would come up with a definition. So, basic might be the ability to read a financial statement. Good is the ability to read a financial statement and with some coaching, interpret what it means. Strong is that you can easily interpret it. And expert is that you could probably instruct around what the impact and the interpretation is. So having some very clear definitions along those four levels, and then as an organization, you can say that we want all of our directors to be at least at a good level, and we want the weighted average of our directors to be at a strong level, and we may want the chair of our audit committee to be functioning at an expert level. And when you've kind of put those definitions in place, you put those lines in the sand in place, then you can do your assessment, find out where you are in terms of a baseline, and then start your recruitment or your development activities in response to that. In terms of governance assessments, there are 3 types of assessment that I work with, and I wanted to share that with you so that you would see how the competency-based assessments fit into that overall framework. The lowest level of assessment is an activity-based assessment. So that is an assessment where the board members are asked, are you doing this thing that your shareholders reasonably expect you to be doing, yes or no? That's activity-based. Results-based is one step higher. Are you getting the results that you want from this activity that you're carrying out that your stakeholders, your shareholders, can reasonably expect you to be doing on their behalf? So I'm not only doing the activity, but as a board, we're getting the results that we expect from that activity. The competency-based is one step higher, and the competency-based is, do we have the skills, competencies, and qualifications around the table to know how to advance that activity that our shareholders can reasonably expect us to be carrying out on their behalf? So are we doing it? Are we getting the results that we want? And do we have the ability to enhance the results through our own skills, competencies, and expertise? So if you focus on the competency-based assessment in isolation, you just know what you're capable of, not what you've achieved. And if you just focus on the results assessment by itself, you just know how you're doing in terms of the board's satisfaction with its performance, not whether or not you've got the skills and competencies to move it ahead. So most of the time, my clients will be doing both a results-based and a competency-based assessment at the same time. This assessment generates insights. Assessments don't tell you exactly what you need to do. They tell you the areas where you need to have a discussion with the board so you can learn more about what the people that were completing the assessment think about the area that was being questioned. And so with those insights, you need to look at your competencies, you need to build on the competencies, you need to come to some understanding about the gaps, and you need to decide how best to fill those gaps. And that takes place through discussion, and the discussion comes from the insights that come out of the assessment process. I mentioned earlier that the self-assessment that the board members would do would be on a 4-point scale. One of the challenges with self-assessments with directors is that one person's definition of a strong is someone else's definition of a good. Even though we've included detailed definitions, there is a bias that goes into how well I think I'm doing compared to the person sitting in the chair next to me around the board table. So I recommend that organizations bring in a third party that actually interviews the members of the board after they've completed their self-assessment. And that interview process is designed to equal the playing field. So, one director may have been a little bit humble in their responses. Another director may have been a little bit aggressive in terms of their skills and competencies. So a skilled third party can interview the directors and smooth it out so that you really do have an apples-to-apples comparison. And if that third party uses a 12-point scale, so basic 1, 2, 3, good 1, 2, 3, strong 1, 2, 3, expert 1, 2, 3. It gives them a lot of flexibility in terms of how they place the board on a scattergraph across each of the areas of competency that you want. And so that does create this consistent approach that is important for boards to move ahead. And what this third party is doing is they're not critiquing the resume. They're not validating the resume. What they're doing is they're having a discussion with each director about what their experience has been and how those experiences contribute to the value at the table. So, you'll have a conversation with the director who talks about their financial acumen, and then you'll say, well, give me an example of where that expertise that you have has created a benefit for the organization or created a benefit for the members. So what you're trying to do is you're helping the director see the connection between the skills and the competencies they have and how they bring that forward, how they become present at the table, how they contribute to discussions that allows them to become an engaged board, going back to that schematic that I showed you earlier. So what you've got here is a sample list of skills and competencies. This actually comes from the Ontario Credit Union environment, where the regulator has published a list of recommended skills and competencies. So this would be a generic list for any credit union in the province of Ontario, and I would argue any credit union across the country. But it's just a starting point. Every board, every credit union should look at what they want to achieve as an organization and then consider whether or not there are additional skills and competencies that it might like to have. I don't know whether we have anyone on the line from Vancity or not, but they've been very high profile in terms of their social mandate, and they've been talking a lot about social impact financing. So how Vancity as a credit union can impact the social fabric of the communities they serve in through the impact of their investments. And so it would be quite reasonable for a director on the Vancity board to be recruited based on their experience around social impact financing or social impact investing. So that would be an example of a unique skill that a particular credit union might bring to the table in addition to these generic skills. And that's where the real value added comes from, is being able to look at your strategic plan and then think through, well, what would that look like in terms of a director competency, and how would we bring that into our skills and competencies matrix. We'll use that information then to recruit, and I would argue that we have a responsibility to share with our members the skills and the competencies that we want around the board table, so that when they are selecting which directors, which incumbents to vote for, they're doing it from an informed place. So I think we do have a responsibility to be clear with our members on what we want around the board table, and then they can deliver to us who they think is a good fit to move the organization forward on their behalf. The Governance Committee also has a very important and a very strong role in the evolution from a historical assessment process over to a skills and competencies assessment process, because it's quite difficult for the full board to be doing all of the heavy lifting on this kind of thing. So it's effective to have a governance committee work through it. So they'll review the inventory of skills. They'll consider director succession issues. Because imagine a situation, I used that financial acumen example earlier. Imagine a situation where all of your high achievers in terms of skills and competencies around financial literacy are all either up for renewal the same year or are all planning on retiring from the board at approximately the same time. If you knew that, you would be taking a very different approach to director succession planning than if you didn't have access to the information. So it's quite effective for credit unions to know and cooperatives to know not only where they want their organization to be in the future, but who holds those skills now, and what's the risk to the organization during an election process if you were to lose some of those people. The big win on this kind of process, a skills and competencies-based approach, is it really allows you to target and focus the areas where you want to invest your director development dollar. There's a lot of directors who have a lot of interests, and they may be asking for a budget to attend a lot of courses or programs or conferences. This gives you a tool to make sure that you're investing in directors in a way that's going to create value for the company. So if a director is already strong in a particular area or expert in a particular area, that might not be the best area to be investing in them. It might be more prudent to be investing in another area where they could use some skill development, or even for another director. So this takes some conversation at the board table, because it doesn't have to be an equal investment director by director. The goal is to move the organization to a particular point. And so there may be more, some directors that require more investment than others, or some committees or some competencies that require more investment than others. So it gives you a really amazing tool to be able to tie your budgets back to the outcomes that the organization is looking for. This leads us to achievement. So if you have an engaged board, and if the board is feeling that it is effectively contributing to the strategies, the goals, and objectives of the organization, the board should then be able to focus on what does success look like? How do we know if we're moving things forward? How do we know if we're affecting a change? How do we know if we're becoming a stronger governance group? So they need to work through this, and they need to articulate that change, and then they need to determine how best to measure that change. And then, tying it back to the competencies to make sure that they can actually get the job done. I often say when I'm working with my clients that ideas are easy, it's the execution that's tough. And this is no more true for governance assessments than it is for anything else. It's really important that the assessments be done and the results be incorporated into the ongoing work of the organization. So in order to achieve that, you need really strong focus. So what exactly do you want to get out of your assessment process? You need to create a process that you know is going to work for your organization. You need to commit the resources to get the job done, and then you need to act on it. And that causes you then to circle back and make sure that you're developing against the insights that come out of that assessment process. So I'm just going to wind up by going through this one more time. You need someone on the board who is prepared to take a leadership role to champion the implementation of the competencies-based model. You also need a board that sees itself in a leadership role where the board has a responsibility to contribute value to the company, not just monitor compliance and oversee the value that management is creating. To do that, you need to assess, to develop a baseline, and then recruit and develop against the insights that come out of that assessment. You need to be able to identify what achievement looks like, and you need to be able to see that that achievement is taking place. You need to be able to make sure that you are contributing the value, which leads you back to the top, the leadership perspective. So, Erin, that's my presentation. I appreciate I did go over it very quickly. I'm happy to take any questions at whatever point in time you think is appropriate.
Thank you very much. That was exactly what we were hoping for from this. I mean, certainly in the discussions at the conferences in the past with corporate secretaries, they've said, we want to know the best way to kind of take this approach to figure out, how it is that we have the most high-functioning board, and does that mean we need to do training, or do we need to look at our recruitment? And this is just one way that allows us to kind of take all of those things into account and address, education, recruitment, if we want to get a third party in and all those kinds of things. So thank you so much for laying the foundation, and I know that you bring with you the experience of having gone through this with lots of different organizations too. So we will, now we have the great opportunity to actually move over to hearing from Carmel, who with the Cooperators Board has been able to take this approach to actually developing a director training program. And director training is always a hot topic, of course, in co-op governance as well. So now from the macro in terms of the framework down to a little bit more micro in terms of how does this actually play out, and how has a cooperative organization been able to implement this kind of model in what they're doing with their directors. So Carmel, I'll hand it over to you now to take us through your process. Hi Carmel, are you there? We see your presentation. We don't yet hear you.
Hi Erin, can you hear me now?
Yes, great. Take it away. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Erin, for the kind introduction, and also to Kim for that excellent presentation. And good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be on the line with you and to share a bit about the Cooperators' experience with developing a director development program. Just a few words about the Cooperators for those of you on the line that may not know who we are. We are a leading Canadian-owned multi-product insurance company. We have hundreds of offices across Canada and thousands of staff. And our primary business, of course, focuses on insurance. We're a multi-line provider, so property and casualty, life, and we also have an institutional investment arm. And we serve Canadian clients at large, as well as have a large credit union client base through our CUMIS affiliation, as well as Cooperators Life Insurance. it's important to understand the democratic structure of our organization. We're owned and controlled by 44 member-owner organizations who are predominantly cooperatives and credit unions, and I know some of you are present on the phone today, so thank you again. Those member owners appoint delegates to serve as their representatives to region committees. We have 7 region committees across the country, and the delegates, again representing their member owners, nominate and elect our 22 member board of directors. So all of the individuals that serve on the board of directors of the cooperators, and that board is the cooperators group, and then its subsidiaries, Cooperators General Insurance Company and Cooperators Life Insurance Company, are nominated and elected by our member owner group. We do not have a nominating committee. We do not have stringent director qualifications. So we very much rely on our member owners to be putting forward names of individuals that they think are skilled and experienced at governing an organization of our complexity and size. Understanding that the people that serve on our board are coming to us from our membership base, so again, cooperative and credit union experienced people, and they don't necessarily, and in most cases do not, have experience in a direct way with the insurance industry. We have for many years had a very robust board effectiveness program to help our directors not only onboard to the cooperators, but also become competent and confident in their role as a director. So we start that journey with new director onboarding. We have an initial orientation session that's a 2-day comprehensive session here at the head office in Guelph, and we involve a number of our key senior leaders as well as the chairperson of the board in terms of delivering their initial orientation. And then mid-year in their first year on the board, we invite them back for a level 2 session. We find that by this point in time, they've gone to a few committee meetings, they've gone to several board meetings, and now they're really getting a sense of what they know and what they don't know. So we invite them back for a level 2 session mid-year to, again, support their onboarding to the Cooperators Board. And then just recently in 2013, we launched a mentoring program. So each one of our new directors is partnered up with a fellow director on the board to provide them with one-on-one mentoring support in their first year of onboarding. To complement that activity for all of our directors, we have a very generous individual director training and development allowance, and that fund is $15,000 per director per term, and our director terms are 3 years. That fund is available to them to use at their discretion, and again, everything needs to be approved by the chair of the board, to fund individual training and development activity so that they can get customized experiences for their skills and needs. And then to complement what we're doing on the individual director side, we're also providing board education days. So twice a year we add a full day to a board meeting, and we schedule workshops throughout the day that all of the directors participate in, and we generally use our internal experts, but we also go externally from time to time to provide them with focused education and learning on key topics that are relative to our business. We also have assessment activities, so all of the directors, once they serve on the board for a year, participate in an individual director assessment process. So that's a peer-to-peer performance evaluation activity. And then lastly, we have an annual governance assessment. And we've had the pleasure of working with Kim Andres for the last number of years on our governance assessment. We generally take a fulsome approach 1 year and then conduct a mini assessment in the following year. And as Kim explained, we've been experiencing the results-based assessment in the last couple of years, and our board has found that to be quite effective and revealing. And from the last assessment, the full assessment, which was in 2011, that's where the idea of the Director Development Program was born. Our board members identified opportunities for improvement, and one of the largest areas that they wanted to focus on as a result of that last full assessment was on director development. They know that they're bringing a lot of cooperative experience and skills to the table, as well as business skills and experience, but they were feeling very exposed in the area of insurance education, and identified the need to have a concentrated effort on a customized director development program that would focus on the business of the cooperators. So that's how this activity came to be. So we worked with the Corporate Governance and Conduct Review Committee of the board. They were really our champion or our sponsor of the Director Development Program, and developed a proposal that we put to the board in 2012 and received unanimous support and approval from the board. So we've implemented the activity in 2013. It's important to know that we conducted a director needs analysis to inform the development of the program. So we used that director needs analysis to really do two things. One is to create a baseline of information so that we could understand at that moment in time where was the board feeling in a position of strength, and where was the board feeling perhaps in a position of weakness in terms of the various skills and experiences and competencies that they thought they needed to possess. And then what are the gaps? So where do we need to focus our attention and the program in terms of competencies? And we'll also be able to use that director needs analysis in the future to take another temperature check to measure the gains that we've made. Our director development program is a competency-based program. It is modular, and we expect that in a director's 3-year term that they will be able to experience the entire curriculum. And again, because we're now in implementation mode, we really see the director development curriculum in the broader context of our overall board effectiveness initiatives. So the next couple of slides are quite content heavy, and I don't intend to read them all. They're really here for people to look at as a takeaway. But we were very deliberate in terms of identifying what the key aims and objectives and outputs of the program would be. Again, at a very high level, it's meant to be a customized experience for directors on the Cooperators Board. So recognizing that people are coming to us with their other experiences, they're able to bring those to the table to translate them into the Cooperators context. But then there's a set of specialized skills and experiences that they felt they needed to really raise the bar and to be that high-performing board that they aspire to be. So the program is customized to reflect the nature of our business, both as an insurance financial services provider as well as a cooperative. It was very important to our board to reflect the cooperative nature of our business in the Director Development Program and bringing that to the table in the discussions as well. We are leveraging our network of contacts both within the insurance industry as well as within the cooperative community to contribute to this program, and I need and want to recognize the contributions of Gailey Foods to our Director Development Program. Quinton Fox, who previously was with CA and now is working with Gailey, has been providing consultancy services to the cooperators in the build of the program. So we've not only leveraged that knowledge with Gailey, but we've also reached out to our partners within the national and international cooperative network to bring that cooperative experience to life as we roll out the program. So again, I've got some aims and objectives and additional information here for people to take away. This slide talks about the competencies that we've identified, again, with the board's approval. So this is what this program is all about. And we recognize that some of the competencies are going to take more than one module to achieve, while others might be combined. So for example, knowledge of the business, that is a very large commitment in terms of time. We've already delivered one module to address that topic area, and we have another module coming up in February that will get at that. Something like corporate and cooperative governance, which of course I would say all of our directors are quite familiar with. We probably won't dedicate a whole module to that. But for now, these are the focus areas that we're looking at when we're delivering and developing our various modules. And again, you can see on the exterior circle, everything's within the context of the cooperators as a cooperative, as well as within the context of us being an insurance and financial services provider. So in June, we held the launch event. We had 5 directors join our board, new to the cooperators, in April. So we felt it really appropriate to use the launch event to do 2 things. One is to introduce the program to the entire board, and 2, to help the board build cohesion and understanding and appreciation amongst themselves. So it really was a multifaceted event, and for, I think, all of the individuals was quite engaging and challenging, and a really good kickoff to what was yet to come. The learning objectives of the launch event was, of course, to orient the participants to the entire Director Development Program, to develop an appreciation of the different learning and communication and personality styles around the board table, and then to reinforce and really create that sense of cohesion amongst the board in terms of their role of providing oversight to the organization. So a bit here about the outcomes that we were able to achieve, and we believe that the launch event also helped us create a level of excitement and anticipation so that our participants are really looking forward to what's yet to come in terms of the future modules. In October, we turned the focus to the business of insurance, and P&C insurance is, about 3/4 of the cooperator's business, so we wanted to start there. It was a one-day event. We introduced it with self-study pre-work to make sure that everyone was coming to us with a basic and common foundation of knowledge. We worked with one of our industry partners, the Insurance Institute of Canada, to make sure that we were building a program that was providing an industry perspective, not just a cooperator's perspective. And the program took the participants through a general introduction to the business of P&C insurance. We also introduced a case study to make sure that we're using different training methodologies, and then ended the day with a panel of industry experts who brought their perspectives to the group on what's happening in our marketplace and what are some of the trends, issues, challenges, and opportunities that's on their minds that perhaps should be on the minds of our directors. So what's next? Well, this really fits in nicely, I think, with what Kim was talking about, and that's the whole business of director competencies. We've decided to take this further and certainly have achieved the support of our board in doing so. So we're now introducing director competencies, so the recommended knowledge, skills, and experiences that we're looking for in our individuals serving on our board. We're introducing those to our membership so that they will take those into consideration when they're naming nominees to the Cooperators Board. We're also, with Kim's help and leadership, linking the 2013 governance assessment to director competencies. So we'll be able, again, to establish that baseline of information, identify the gaps, and then work on an action plan to address the gaps. And then, of course, continuing the rollout of the program in 2014 with the delivery of 3 more modules. So that's very much what's on my plate most days of the week, but it's been a very exciting undertaking for the cooperators, a very exciting undertaking for our board, and I need to give our Corporate Governance and Conduct Review Committee a lot of thanks and praise for the leadership that they've shown in championing this for the cooperators. So that's a very quick summary of what we've been up to in the area of Director Development Program, and I certainly welcome any questions today on the line or afterwards if people have interest in discussing it more. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's very much a great case study in terms of what you've been able to do in a relatively short amount of time. There's been let's see, we've got, I'll just change the screen back over to myself so I can show the pictures of Kim and Carmel here. But what we'll do now is we'll actually turn it over to folks. If anybody has questions for either of these two, they are busy people, and we're lucky to have them here today. So if there's anything that came up for you in the course of their presentations, this is a great time to ask it. So what you can do using your GoToWebinar menu is you can actually raise your hand on that, or you can type your question into the question box. So we've got our first question from Betty, and we've got, so Betty, you attended the last Corporate Secretaries Conference, and your question is, I'm wondering if you consider diversity on the board as a competency. So Kim or Carmel, who would like to tackle that one first?
I can take that first and then hear Carmel's comments after. Certainly I think you want to recruit with diversity as a lens, but I don't know that diversity itself would be a competency. What the competency would probably be open-mindedness, or the ability to interact with people of a differing view. So it's probably the behavior, the personal characteristics that I would put in the competencies, but I would recruit through a diversity lens.
Thank you very much for that. Carmel, do you have anything to add?
Yes, Erin, thank you. So in our communication with our member owners, right now at our region committee meetings, and then following the region committee meetings and our formal call for nominations, in that package of material where we're talking about the desired competencies for potential nominees, we're also asking our members to take diversity into consideration. So, you know, diversity of experience, diversity in gender, geographic diversity. So we are encouraging that as a consideration amongst our membership.
Thank you very much. And we had a question, the three of us, for those folks who are on the call today, because I think we've got about 20 different organizations that are represented here, co-ops and credit unions, and federations as well. And I'm just wondering if anyone wants to chime in if they actually use a competency-based approach or are starting to look into that in their organization. We'd love to give you a chance to kind of share your experience so far as well. So you can go ahead and send a message if that's the case. And so I guess a question for Kim and Carmel then. In terms of how people go about doing this, so if folks are using other types of models in how they do their, you know, director assessments, in how they sort of look at what they need on their board and how they want to do recruitment and all that type of thing, how do they switch over into looking at this, and what are the things, you know, to keep in mind? So Kim, you gave a great overview in terms of the methods in which people can do this and the different tools that they might use in the process of implementing this type of competency framework, but I know that there's also sort of the flip side of it too. So do either of you want to share a bit about that in terms of what it took to implement something like this?
Well, I can address it, Erin. It's Carmel. From a practical experience, and I tried to get at this in our presentation, I think you really need the commitment from someone on the board to champion this. And we were very fortunate to have both the chair of the board as well as the entire governance committee feeling a compelling reason to move in this direction. So with that level of support and conversation at the board table, it was a fairly easy sell, the concept. It is a significant commitment, both in terms of time, and not just staff time, but board time as well, and expense, because when you're building something customized, it is more expensive than just buying something off the shelf. So there is a significant commitment that goes along with it, both budget and time and organizationally.
Thank you.
And I'll maybe add to that a little bit. I think the board has to have come to the conclusion that it's receiving diminished returns from its current assessment process. So, you know, it's going through the motions of an assessment, but it's finding that the insights and the impact of the assessment are less year after year after year. And so it really wants to, you know, go deeper, learn more, and raise the bar. So it's important that the board come to that conclusion that they're going through an assessment not just because they have to, but because they actually want the results to generate some positive benefit for themselves and for the credit union. Because it's not effective if you go through this exercise and then you have directors debating the conclusions that the group collectively came to. So you need to have that mental shift already in place, that the board's ready for something a little bit more meaningful, a little bit more insightful to drive the continuous improvement around the table. I think that's really key.
Thank you. Well, this is good. Okay, we've got a few more questions that have come in, or comments. Actually, Lynn Tupin, I'll actually unmute you so you can share a bit. You're working with an organization right now that is looking at implementing this. So if you want to tell us a little bit about how that's coming along and what attracted the organization to this model. Go ahead, Lynn. Okay, actually, Lynn, could you unmute yourself if you're able to share a bit about this? Oh. Okay, Lynn, we'll come back to you in just a moment. Ray Surratt with Atlantic Central. Ray, you mentioned that you're looking into a model like this. Do you want to tell us a little bit about why you're attracted to this model and what stage you're at this point? Okay. Okay, sorry, for some reason, Ray, I can't unmute you right now. I apologize. I guess we'll just note that Atlantic Central is looking into this model, but it's not yet implemented. We've got another question for Kim that's come in. And the question is, as the regulators place more emphasis on competencies, is it your opinion that this might become mandatory? So if we can't recruit directors with the competencies that we need, will we see the ability to appoint directors perhaps on a limited basis? So it sounds like outside of the membership. Do you see that coming down the pipe? To Kim.
So the regulator in Ontario has already taken a position on competencies, and they've asked credit unions in the province to implement a competency framework. They haven't been prescriptive in terms of what needs to be in the framework. They've given a draft, and they've given some examples, and they've given some advice, but it's up to each individual credit union to put in place the competencies that it needs to meet its goals and objectives and move forward. So I do think that it's a trend, and I do think that it helps to be proactive rather than reactive, because if you already have in place a program that works well for your organization, and you are creating value through that, and then why would somebody want you to do something different? So I do recommend being proactive on that. One of the things that I talk to boards about a lot is, don't jump to the conclusion that a competencies-based model requires that you end up, with just, lawyers and accountants around the table. That's not what a community credit union is all about. Community credit unions are about representing the interests of members with people who are like-minded. So you do need to have directors that understand the business that we're in. They do need to be competent in terms of their ability to understand and work their way through the financial issues that we face, because we are a financial institution, but they don't need to be accountants. What you need is the ability to develop the people that the members send to you in a way that's going to be most effective for your organization. So I think if organizations are really proactive around recruitment, succession planning, there's a number of my clients that have a process that they often call an evergreen file, where directors are constantly on the lookout for people in the membership base that would be good potential future directors. So it could be, a new person that's moved into town that is taking a leadership position in the community. It could be a young person that has a particular skill set that the board would like to have on the table. But if you've got an evergreen file of people that you're interested in, then directors can be continuously networking with those people. And when the timing is right, they may put their hand up to go through the nomination process. So, you can always appoint a director, but doesn't really reflect the values, I don't think, of a credit union. I think you want to have interest in your membership base, and you want people to look at your organization as the place that they want to serve at to make a difference in the community. So, do that through a recruiting lens and identify those people that you think are going to make a difference on the board and build a relationship with them so that when they're ready and when you're ready, they can be a nominee.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've got another question, or actually a comment that came in from Heidi Harris at Northern Savings Credit Union. And she has said that we've just completed a skills, experience, and competency gap analysis, including an ideal state. And it took considerable time to do this, but now the nominating committee has a good base to start their recruitment process for the upcoming election. And also, we're beginning work on the board training and development, she said. So thank you for sharing that. That's great.
That's exactly what you like to hear, right? That's exactly the outcome. They went through the exercise, and now they have the data that they can use to actually drive value for the organization.
Excellent. Okay, so now we've got another comment that has come in as well, saying that this is Melanie Broguet. And so she said, we're looking into this. It's difficult when you have a limited pool of people to bring certain expertise at the board level when you are a worker cooperative. But there is definitely value to assess what competencies we need at the board level, what we currently have, and where we will invest. It will also allow us to communicate to our members when the election time comes about what we're looking for in a director. I think that the idea that this can impact the nominations process and, like you say, inform both the membership in terms of whether they want to step forward and self-select if they have those competencies, or in terms of informing the membership so that they make a solid decision in terms of nominating someone and electing someone to the board. I think that's a really good point. Okay. So we've got just a couple minutes left together. So I'm wondering if Kim or Carmel, if you have, and I apologize that we couldn't unmute you, Lynn, for some reason with the technology, but thank you for mentioning that about Federated Cooperatives Limited right now developing their competency-based approach and looking at sort of the job description of boards. And that's really neat in terms of looking at boards as a human resource function as well, in terms of how we recruit for and design the rest of our structures as organizations in terms of the human capacity we want to see there. So I wonder, Kim or Carmel, if you have any final comments you'd like to share with folks today.
Well, I do, and I'm sure Carmel does as well. I would, as I'm going through this exercise, I would start my conversation at the strategic level. So what is it that makes our cooperative different? What is it that differentiates us as the marketplace? What is it that we want to be known for? What's our brand? And then what does that look like in terms of director skills and competencies? And then the second thing to that is, what's the kind of behavior that we want around the table that's actually going to set the tone and support the culture that we need for our organization? That would be the personal characteristics. And then thirdly, what are the technical skills that the directors need to have or to receive through development that will actually allow them to be a steward and an advocate on behalf of the organization? So I wouldn't start with the technical first, and I think that's where perhaps people assume that you would start around the the financial literacy, et cetera. I would start with the strategic, then I would look at the personal characteristics, and then I would close the loop on the technology or the technical issues. That would be my recommended approach.
Thank you.
Over to Carmel.
Thank you. Yeah, I just go back to something that Kim said a little while ago, and that's really what is the aspiration? So in our case, the board aspired to be a higher performing board. They knew that they were bringing a lot of skills and experiences to the table, but they wanted to take it another notch up so that they could feel that level of confidence and competence that they thought they needed to bring as a group of people to the cooperators. So that was their aspiration, and then it really was turned over to the Corporate Governance Committee and management to deliver on that quest. And as I mentioned earlier, we were fortunate to have the leadership and champion support at the board table to bring that forward to their peers, and I think that really was the kernel of success, in that we had the board self-identify this desire and need and then support amongst the directors to make something different happen.
Great. Thank you very much, so much to both of you and to everyone who has joined us here. I think in terms of having a first webinar, targeted at corporate secretaries and focused on governance, I'm thrilled with having the both of you here and having so many folks join us for the conversation. Hopefully this inspires folks to go back to their boards and look at what they're doing and hopefully see new opportunities for them. What I'll do you'll get a follow-up email, everyone, about this webinar, and we'll link you to both of the presenters' presentations so that you can review them again later, and you'll have their contact information as well. And you'll also get a link to just a quick survey that allows you to influence what kinds of topics we deal with future events for corporate secretaries and future webinars as well. So if you just want to take a moment once you get that email to click through and let us know what you want to see in the future, then we'll make sure that we do something that fits your needs. So thanks again to our presenters and to everyone who joined.
Thank you, Erin, and thanks to all for the opportunity.
Yes. Goodbye, everyone.
Take care.
Bye-bye.